our industry is about the added value from human beings with language knowledge, or maybe that will evolve more to cultural knowledge or so. But it's about the added value coming from the human being. That's not going to change. That is what it's about.
Hello, dear friends. Welcome to a new episode of Merging Minds powered by BureauWorks. Today I'm excited because I'm bringing you one of my favorite industry leaders, and he's Mirko Plitt. Hey, Mirko. Hello, how you doing?
Hey, doing great. Thanks, Javi.
Mirko, so can you please introduce yourself first? Who you are, where were you born, where you based, what's your current role?
So I'm Mirko Plitt. I'm currently working with the WHO Academy, so the World Health Organization Academy. That's a new division within WHO, essentially to bring training on public health topics to the world. You know, not only to WHO staff, but further than that to the world's population. Very ambitious, very exciting project, and I'm in charge currently of multilingualism, so making sure that the training is available in the languages of the learners, and beyond that also localization. So we're trying to to kind of do what our industry has always promising, meaning not only translating but also adapting products to local need, practical and cultural context, and so on. I'm German, but I live in French-speaking Switzerland. I've lived here for a long time. I moved here to work for US, for the European headquarters or localization department at the time of a Californian software maker who has since left, but I stayed here. And my background is originally I'm a computational linguist, old school computational linguist. So I started in as a machine translation developer when that was still pretty much a dodgy business, and it's been
Tell me more
amazing
about
to
the
see.
dodgy business. Tell me more about dodgy business because it looked at some point that still is today, right? But what is? Tell me more about that. I'm interested in hearing how dodgy it was back in the day when you started.
So that was when was that? In the early 90s. So I worked for
Yeah.
something what now you would call a startup. At the time, it was just a messy little company with strange funding models. And I'm not going to mention names because I'm not going to say very nice things about this company. But so that was my first job, and there was. I'm afraid there was a little bit of cheating involved at the time with machine translation. So
Okay.
the company took part in these machine translation competitions that were organized by one of the services of the Pentagon at the time. Maybe that still exists. They found out, the company that I worked for won, I think, 1 or 2 years in a row as best machine translation solution back then. And the way we won this was because well, a key person in our company was actually a very fast, very talented translator. So instead of letting the machine translate, he just translated very quickly the text we got. And but the organizers of the competition kind of figured out that something was wrong. So the third year, they decided to change the rules, and they shortened the delay in which you had to return the translations, and then we came out last. So that's a type of thing that happened at the time. The other thing is the company went broke. I mean, that still happens to companies even in the translation industry, I guess, today. The company went broke, and my first job experience was that I was left with a gap of 4 months salary in my account. But
Oh,
that's yeah. Anyway,
that hurt.
I've managed to compensate that since, but yeah. So it was a bit dodgy.
Yeah. No, I see. I see. I see. I see. And how long have you been working with the WHO so far?
WHO have I've worked close to not quite 4 years yet in different kind of capacities, or at least in different types of contractual conditions. It's That's one of the challenges that people, I think, are often not aware of when you work for these international organizations. That's from an administrative point of view can be quite complicated and challenging. And sometimes, yeah, I think in a way you could say also dodgy, maybe some of the deals that or how would you call it, were arrangements, contractual arrangements are a little bit little bit surprising. But yeah, so in different types of contractual arrangements, I've been working there for 4 years now. Before that, actually, I should have mentioned that I worked as head of technologies at Translators Without Borders for also 4 years, I think. And that's how I got actually in touch with WHO, because we Translators Without Borders, I know they're called now, or kind of partially rebranded as Clear Global, but that wasn't the case yet at the time. So they also and continue, I think, to work for another division of WHO, and that's kind of how I got in touch with this particular project.
So going down on memory lane, down through memory lane today,
Hmm.
like, can you think about the evolution of that role from computational linguist to who you are today? Like, tell me a little bit about how you evolved there. How were some of the most interesting and pivotal moments that made you be who you are today?
Yeah, so I kind
Without
of,
the cheating part, so we know those
yeah,
already. Yeah,
without the cheating. Yeah,
we
that
know
I
you
wasn't
learned
that
from those.
great at the cheating. I think I wasn't that. I think that's maybe a skill that I should have focused more on the cheating. But it's
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
I think linguists, and I'm a linguist at heart. I've always considered myself a linguist, but not the type of. And then always people ask me when I say that, always ask me, "Oh, how many languages do you speak?" I think we've all heard that, right? How many languages do you speak?
yeah.
You do something interesting. How many languages do you speak? And then the next level is, maybe a bit less on how many words do you translate, or so, although that question becomes a bit rarer, but it used to be a common question in the industry. And how many? Anyway, so I'm a linguist at heart, but one that I'm just fascinated by language in general, what we are as people, and as social animals as well, and the role it plays there. I never necessarily had the ambition to speak many different languages, and so I started actually studying Indo-European languages. So initially Sanskrit, ancient Greek, and Latin. Then ended up doing more modern languages, like French and Spanish. Ended up in computational linguistics. It was pretty new at the time. So I think where I went to university was the first, maybe at least in France, was the first university to offer this that year, to open this, what you would call now a master's program in computational linguistics. I mean, that was, as I said, on the one hand dodgy, but also really still research. And I think at the time no one would have expected that we would be where we are today. It's been an incredible journey. I think we are all privileged. I mean, like my generation, if you will, we're privileged to have seen something as imagined in a way, as just nearly a philosophical concept that machines might be able to translate in theory, to where we are today. It's just incredible that that's possible within one professional life, to see this development, but also to accompany it somewhat. I've always been kind of keen on implementing technology-based solutions. I've always been fascinated actually by the intersection, or the interface between translators, linguists, or human beings, if you will, and the technology. And that
Yeah.
has been involved in. So one of my achievements, I guess, has been to implement within the same company machine translation, to have implemented it twice in the same organization within 10 years difference, I think. Once more for gisting, and the second time as a productivity tool. And just within those 10 years, what you were able to do with machine translation was just amazing to see that, from the good old rule-based machine translation back in 2000 or whenever that was, to statistical
I love
machine
how you're a
translation in the.
technologist at heart. I love how you express it in your, and I love, because I was going to ask you precisely this question about what is one of the key innovations that you've been a part of, and I really love it that you're telling us this already. So that's very exciting. Continue telling us more, please.
Yeah. So what can I tell you about that? I mean, of course, as you know, there was a big technology shift, really, going from rule-based machine translation to statistical machine translation, and then to neural machine translation, and today's large language models. Arguably, you could say that today's technology is kind of still rooted in the statistical approach. The first time I heard about statistical machine translation was actually already in the 90s, so already when I was at university, and people were laughing at these mathematicians in Canada. I think it was at the time, maybe some IBM researchers, how stupid they are, they have no idea of linguistics, how ridiculous. And then what happened is, of course, just the development of the internet. I don't with well, the calculating, I mean, the power of of computers on the one hand, but also the availability of data. I know people who worked in linguists, computational linguists. Certainly, today's generation doesn't like um, hearing that, and I agree in a way. I'm not in a position to really make that judgment, but arguably, what's really driven this technology is the availability of data and of calculating power to actually do something with the data. But some of these algorithms that have been used to build these models are interestingly, very venerable old algorithms. Some of them, dating back to the 18th century or so. Whichever they are.
I'm enjoying to see the passion you have as a technologist, as what you've done that has led you to today. It's brilliant, and I always love to share the journey of leaders like you, to share this kind of experience that they lived and how it was, how the world was a few years ago when we perhaps the younger generations were not there and we didn't know. So I'm so happy that you're sharing this with us. I also want to talk about your current role right now,
Hmm.
and I want to ask you to explain us a little bit what you're exactly doing now at the World Health Organization Academy. How is it? How is a normal day at the day of Mirko? And what is the principal goal and what you want to achieve?
So the goal really, I mean, that's the beauty or the challenge of working for an organization like WHO is, of course, the global mission that we have
Yeah.
in this context of public health, and to allow people, learners around the world to access lifelong learning, to continuously improve based on the guidelines developed by WHO, to accelerate the implementation of these guidelines, and in general just help the planet get ready for the challenges that we have been become acutely aware of, be it only during the last few years with COVID and so on.
Must
It's
have been
a
crazy times to work. Yeah. Must have been
yeah,
exciting
it's
times to
been.
work. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it showed also maybe some of the challenges or maybe weaknesses of WHO doesn't have the experience of building something like what we're building. So we've spent some time of I would say just getting ready and putting the structure into place, and we're not completely done. The academy hasn't actually officially launched yet. It will be launched at the end of this year. With there will be a big event with Tedros and presumably Macron as the French president, because it's the French government or the French authorities who have essentially been financing this project thus far.
Okay.
We will have a nice building that is ready now, headquartered in Lyon in France, provided by France. But all this has been taking a lot of time. So a lot of this is really trying to put in place a structure that allows us to produce, I mean, mainly e-learning. It's not only about e-learning, but e-learning is given the global scale and we're in 2024, e-learning, of course, plays a central role in what we're doing. So we started under the premise that this would be like a startup, but of course, an organization like WHO has a limited experience or is relatively poorly prepared to run startups. So part of, say, my job my and my peers' job has been to figure out, how we can be agile whilst fitting within the framework of such an organization, but also being able to leverage, of course, the credibility and just the power of such an organization. So that's it's quite different from what I've seen elsewhere, like in the industry. Also, just the time frame. Where the project was started, I think in 2019. I joined, as I said, in 2021, I guess. You would not, in the industry, you wouldn't spend, say, 4 or 5 years preparing for a launch. You just
Yeah.
wouldn't have that time to do it. So that's already one thing. You have to be ready that it takes just more time to get all the actors together and the infrastructure in place. So but also, just to define the objectives. As I mentioned earlier, so my role is essentially about localization and to develop this concept, what that actually entails, how we can work with stakeholders in the countries, in the regions around the world, to actually adapt our courses, not only to translate them, to make them really meaningful locally, so that they have the impact that we have to have. I mean, that's also the exciting part of it. It's quite a new type of work, and as I also kind of alluded to, it's a little bit. I feel like I'm finally in a position to contribute to fulfilling this promise of the localization industry to do more than just translating, but really also with the event of AI to actually go further and provide products, e-learning in this case, that is much more adapted to local, cultural, practical contexts.
Yeah, well, that's great, and I wanna ask you now a little bit about the leadership. When I invite my guests here to Merging Minds, we always try to ask them about their experience towards leadership.
Hmm.
What does leadership mean to one, right? So, what does leadership mean to you, Mirko? How has this way of leading teams and leading these projects that you're doing currently evolved over time?
It's an interesting question also because I didn't really want to have like people management roles in my career. That was not
Okay.
something that I had, that was kind of part of what I wanted to do. I was probably much more technology and language technology motivated. I found that really that was something I felt passion for. I figured out during my career also, just through by observing the managers I was working for, that actually it's quite interesting. I started enjoying it at some point, working with people and understanding their, like, for instance, different motivations that people have, and just to understand that they are the ones that bring the value to what is being done. And like as a leader, as a manager, you kind of have to take a little bit a step back. Now that works when you work with smaller teams. I don't have a lot of experience working with very large teams. I actually kind of a couple of times in my career, rather opted for working with smaller focused teams that delivered a lot rather than with larger teams, so that I could kind of stay close to what we're doing also, say, in terms of technology development or so. But I think, yeah, I definitely have learned that as a leader, you have to have, I mean, you have to kind of step back a little bit and just accept that it's the others who matter. It's not you who matters. It's the others who actually who bring, as I said, the value to the table. And so there's a form of modesty, I guess, that you need to develop, humility that you need to develop as an effective leader. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
No, I was going to tell you that I guess in getting to that point, empathy has played a big role in your way of leading teams. That's correct.
Yeah, I think it has, and but also, okay, what I guess what I was trying to say and then forgot is that I mean, I've learned by making mistakes, of course.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
made some pretty uh, you know fairly sizable mistakes where I feel with hindsight I didn't do the right thing. I kind of understand why and can justify and so on why I did it at the time. But where, my takeaway, sometimes for some of them, maybe years after, was, that was a mistake. And I'm glad that I learned from it. For instance, by taking myself too seriously or by like forcing team members to do things that visibly they weren't, that was not what they were good at or what they wanted to do, and then just kind of thinking, I'm the manager, I can, I tell you what to do, and so do it. And that's just not how you succeed. But sometimes you have to go through this experience until you get, well, yeah, that's not going to work, that's not going to help anyone.
I want to ask you that. Do you follow any particular strategies? I was thinking to nurture the development of talent within those teams you lead.
So, I mean, I'm a father of three as well, and I have noticed both in colleagues who have children, and then I guess with myself, that we kind of replicate approaches that we have with our own children. I wouldn't say it's a method or something, but I do feel that I do recognize that the same way that I try for my teenage children and or young adults now to become independent, but whilst getting support, that is kind of similar similar how I try to approach management. So it's for me, it's a, and that's part of why I think I've started liking it in the end, is to
Hmm.
see when you see people grow and evolve and grow and evolve beyond you. So I'm definitely, I've never been someone who wouldn't want to manage someone who's visibly better at things than I am. I've always enjoyed that, and I think that's a pretty good quality in a manager, if you can just have that, again, humility to actually enjoy working with people or managing people who are better than you, and letting them grow and figuring out ways and creating conditions for them to grow and deliver more for whatever the company or organization, whatever you work for. I'm not sure I would call that a method, but it's a bit like, yeah, it's around empathy as well. People can be super talented, super intelligent, and so on. They still have emotional side. They still can be frustrated. They can still can be really happy and proud and whatever, just like anyone else. And I think you need to develop a sense for that, and to not to exploit that, but just to let that happen. And then it's fun for everyone, also just on a human level, to be working together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm thinking as well, in the environments that we tend to work in, such global world, in such global teams that we tend to work, lots of conflict tends to happen sometimes, just because of some certain thing, just because of some certain misunderstanding, just because of some certain whatever cultural thing, right? Can you think
Mm.
of some situation that came across your table and you had to handle it in some certain way to
Yeah,
don't say
one
names.
one
You don't
No,
have to
no,
say
no.
any name.
Again, when I was, I'm not actually that good at remembering names anyway. But yeah, I remember leading a team at some point where it was a global team with, members in Singapore, in different locations in the US, and San Francisco, and in Switzerland, and in France. So it was a fairly small team. I don't know, 6 or 7 people or so. But there were two French people on the team, and so we had all these different nationalities and cultural contexts. But it was the two French who just didn't get on together. And maybe, I mean, it sounds a bit like, I don't want to go with national stereotypes and so on, but there was maybe a little bit of that as well. There's a certain culture, say, debate in the French culture, that I personally I love. Actually, it's one of the things that I really enjoy when I'm in France, is that people are just enjoy. And maybe in Spain it's a bit like that as well. You just enjoy, also just have lively conversations. But yeah, so it was one of the challenges was for me, just to figure out a configuration, how to have these two very talented key members of the team, to not to have too much overlap and then conflict. And
Okay.
yeah, so that did work out in the end. But yeah, so the irony of it was really that it was not, say, between the Chinese and the Americans, or you know it was between two people from the same country who couldn't get on together.
Yeah, well, interesting, interesting, interesting. It happens all the time, eh? It happens all the time. So, I want to ask you a little bit about your vision of the future, right? Like, since you've been here, since you've been since you're a technologist at heart, and you've been in the industry
Hmm.
for around 30 years, right? You've seen everything come, go, change, be new, disruptive, or whatever, right? But can you think of emerging technologies, and or can you name some emerging technologies that you see having the biggest impact on the future in our industry?
I think the challenge for us is, so I don't have a privileged say, view on technology. I think with hindsight, it's like within your life. I mean, even within my own life, with hindsight, you see, oh, it all makes sense. There's a certain logic. I've always done something with languages and technology, and visibly, and that's my space. I'm quite glad that I've been able to do that in different sectors, for LSPs, for as a machine translation developer, as a project manager, as a team manager in medical technology, but always with language, and then in a big software company, then in Translators Without Borders, and now in an international organization. I think that's quite, but always well. So it seems like there's actually a theme that I didn't really define myself when I started. So with the industry, it's a little bit similar. With hindsight, you could certainly say, oh yeah, of course, it makes sense how machine translation has improved, and services have been evolving, and all that. Sometimes it's very difficult, as we all know, to actually predict what's going to happen even next year or so. in terms of I don't have privileged knowledge also, and I would challenge anyone who pretends that they have, including in companies like OpenAI. Also, I find that sometimes quite silly actually, how we expect people working for these companies to somehow have a knowledge how this will affect the labor market. For instance, if someone says in OpenAI, all the jobs will be gone in 5 years or something, where do they take that knowledge from? What do they know more about labor reality than anyone else? Anyway, so I wouldn't say that, but what I think kind of becoming clear and has been clear is that our industry is about the added value from human beings with language knowledge, or maybe that will evolve more to cultural knowledge or so, but it's about the added value coming from the human being. That's not going to change. That is what it's about.
I'm loving it because for some reason this same quote that you just said is what all the leaders that come and present themselves here in emerging minds say. I love it, and actually, it goes really along the philosophy of Bureau Works as well, like a human-centered view of technology. So I'm glad you're saying this as well.
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, I'm disappointed. I'm not the only one to have that incredible wisdom. But I mean, it is, and in a way, it's good news. I know this. It's challenging also, say, for people who enter the industry, also to know what this job would look like. It's challenging for even for someone like me. Where I should go, where should take the team that I'm in charge of, the organization or the strategy that I'm in charge of. Where should take that? It's not clear. Plus, it definitely is evolving very quickly. Now, whether that pace will remain, I don't know. I presume not. I think there are kind of cycles where things accelerate and then slow down and then accelerate again. Just simply because we have, I think, as a society, also limited ability to just keep changing everything all the time. There's a
Yeah,
demographic side to it anyway. But coming
yeah,
back to that, it's I think so. Why I'm saying this is probably less about the human added value. It's less that's to reassure people or so. And I think in the past sometimes it was that people try to reassure translators and say, yeah, machine translation is never going to be as good or so. It is logical, and the other thing that is logical is that the more you shrink the added value, in the overall production, if you will, the added value from the human, the more value it actually represents, meaning the more costly it will become necessarily. That's where
indeed.
the value is, and that's where we're focusing as an industry. So that's, I think, where it matters is that we should not, unless we really have incredible technology that can rival with, say, OpenAI AI or companies of that. We have to focus on the human added value, not on trying to build and pretend we can build LLMs because there's the word language in it or something.
Yeah.
That's not the competency, not the skills that we have in our industry. That's my point
I
of view,
have
at
to
least.
ask you as well now. I'm thinking as well, like, what would you tell? Like, now we've jumped from the future to the past. What
Yeah.
kind of advice would you give the young Mirko starting in the industry 30 years ago? What would it be?
Yeah, I think yeah, I've heard these types of questions before, and I think I kind of always hope no one would ever ask me that. Uh, it's like, what would be the best advice? Sorry, I don't want to criticize your questions, but
No worries, no worries. We'll skip
uh,
it. Don't worry, we can skip
no,
this one
no,
because
it's good.
it was just like to wrap it up.
Um,
So, and I wanted to ask you that question only as well. I wanted to ask you to give our listeners some takeaways for the future, for the careers, or some advice that you would like to share with them.
Okay, so one more anecdotal advice, learn Unix. I don't know if that still holds, but I think the most useful practical skill that I ever learned, and pretty early in my, well, I mean, university studies, was to work in Unix. I think that has been incredibly useful until today.
Okay.
Some of the work I've done, like at the time when it was about installing statistical machine translation, open source machine translation solution, this Moses system, for those who remember that, you needed to know your thing about, and that was clearly something that differentiated me from many other people in the industry who didn't have that Linux background and couldn't really work with that sort of thing. Anyway, so that's maybe more anecdotal. In a way, it means you have to learn, like in any trade, there's a certain foundation that you need to have, a hands-on foundation to be able to build on, and sometimes it might be difficult to anticipate what that is going to be. In my case, I kind of was lucky that Unix played that role. In general, I think I won't be particularly original. Try to understand what you like and try to do, and spend your career where you like. What you should probably, depending a little bit on your motivation. Um, I certainly early on, I kind of was somewhat ambitious career-wise, and I think that didn't necessarily help my career actually initially. Because there's not that much you can quote control over about that.
Mhm.
Plus the idea, what it is, what success means to you. So we kind of tend to replicate what we're being taught, and it takes us some time to understand that for each of us it might mean something different. Success. So maybe yeah, so maybe my young self, I would probably say something along those lines. Then I wouldn't behave any different, of course.
No, there's nothing to regret. Just to say like, hey, what it would be like, right?
Yeah.
Mirko, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thanks for coming to Merging Minds to share your experience. Yeah, I hope to see you soon in person. And to all of those listening, thanks for being here. Thanks for following us for another episode. I hope you've enjoyed the time getting to know Mirko. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Javi. Bye bye.
Bye.